welcome you here to our discussion this afternoon, the topic of which is art, a question of accessibility. The speakers this afternoon are Georgie Thompson, who is the Assistant Programmer for the National Collection at IMA, and Carol O'Mara, who is a Bank of Ireland Research Fellow here at NCAD. And my name is Eleanor Swan, and I'm a second-year master's student at the college. So before we begin, I'd like you all just to close your eyes for a moment while I describe a painting to you by the artist Francis Bacon, and I want you to create an image of this painting in your own mind. Well, keep your eyes closed while I read it out to you. So, this portrait of Michael Lears is not an exact portrayal of the writer, but Francis Bacon never intended it to be. Instead, he wanted to capture the spirit and the essence of his friend. The canvas is small in size, but it is occupied by the full size of the head. The head is long and narrow, beginning with a trunk-like protrusion in the forehead, descending to a long, elegant, tunnel-like nose. Below the nose is half a mouth, with a protrusion ascending to the right to obliterate the eye and obscure parts of the head in seeping black brushstrokes of shadow. The dark background laps around the face like a black liquid, submerging all but a few features. Individual features of the face are shown to us in a chromatic swirl of colour, which give a sense of the facial features in motion. It is through the confusion of these features that a single eye fixes us with an astonishing intensity. The portrait is a masterpiece of controlled distortion and captures a mixture of compassion and despair, which Bacon saw as the essence of Lears's personality. Now, open your eyes and see, is this painting anything like what you imagined? And this begs the question, is an audio description of a painting enough to capture the excitement in a 2D work of art, or is there another element that can be employed to breathe life into it? My research is looking at art from the perspective of those who are visually impaired. How can somebody understand a 2D work of art if they cannot see it? For my part of the discussion, I will explain how I became interested in this particular area, my research to date, and the conclusions that I've come to. In 2006, I graduated from NCAD with a Bachelor of Design, and my degree show exhibition comprised of a series of life-sized figurative pieces which addressed the human condition and how we react to one another. I was fascinated watching the people looking at the work, and when I told them it was okay to touch the pieces, they immediately entered into a dialogue about what they were made from, how they were made, and what was the meaning behind them. This led me to my current course of research, as I could see how being able to interact with the work brought a whole new meaning to the viewer. In my first year of my project, I looked at what paintings I find interesting and exciting, and two of my favourites are The Last Judgment by Michelangelo and Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. These two paintings are very large in scale. The Last Judgment fills the north wall of the Sistine Chapel in Rome, and Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights is 2.5 metres high. They're both wonderful examples of painting full of movement, fantasy and torment. But how do you convey this excitement to somebody who cannot see them? Another interest of mine is Japanese Satsuma ware. In contrast to the paintings, many of these pieces are very small, but the fine detail in the images painted around the vessels illustrating family life or warriors going into battle tell a very big story. In fact, this little vessel here is only 3 1/4, about 7 centimetres in diameter, and the inside of it is just painted with hundreds of tiny little butterflies. And they're absolutely beautiful pieces of work, and they're so small. So I knew then that the elements I hoped to capture in my new body of work had to be exciting enough to stir a curiosity in the viewer, both sighted and visually impaired. But at this point, I had no idea how this was going to evolve. I began this journey by making a series of various shapes, both smooth and textured, that were to be held in the hand. But I soon realised that this really was going nowhere. At the end of the day, they were just shapes, and I didn't feel that they had a connection to anything else. So I decided to think about the vessel. And looking at that, firstly, I knew it had to have an interesting surface and texture that would be exciting enough to touch and solid enough so that it couldn't be pushed over if it was if people were feeling it. So I was interested in the face, in particular expressions and gestures, as they tell so much about a person. For example, a raised eyebrow, or a sideways glance, or a look of horror. But again, in the end, these were just vessels, and there was a connection that I didn't have, and I decided, no, I must move on from that in some way. And it was this connection that I was looking for. So at this point, I knew I needed to know more about my own topic. So I took some time out, and I did the Craft in the Classroom project with the Crafts Council in Ireland. And I worked on various community and youth projects around the country. But the most relevant one of these was with Rosmini Secondary School in Drumcondra in Dublin. This is the secondary school for the blind, and I worked on a project with the transition year students to create an outdoor sculpture for their garden. There were 16 students in all, 6 of whom had varying degrees of visual impairment, and we addressed issues of a sense of self. The students made molds of their faces and hands and wrote messages on the pieces. And some of the visually impaired students wrote their messages in Braille along their hands or along the side of their faces. And Robert, who lost his sight when he was very young, he was really proud of himself because he made the crest of the school, which was placed on the top of the sculpture. So for many of the students, this was their first time to participate in an art class and work with clay, but their engagement and their curiosity with the materials was so refreshing, and the comments on the feel and the smell and the plasticity of the clay were really very surprising. So I struggled with my project and what direction I needed to take, and I realised that whatever I was going to do had to have a connection. So I've always been interested in Francis Bacon, particularly since he was born in Dublin, and he spent then the first 16 years of his life living not too far from where I live. So looking at his portraits one day, I wondered how you could explain these to somebody who couldn't see them. So I decided that to focus in on my research, I would recreate these portraits in 3D form to interact with, and hopefully by providing an alternative sensory experience, the viewer would get an insight into Bacon's approach to painting. So there is the issue, of course, of interpretation and appropriation, but many artists out there have looked to past masters for inspiration, and Bacon being a prime example of one. In his series of paintings on Pope Innocent X clearly reference Velasquez's painting of the same name, and his figurative paintings are based on the rapid sequence photographs of the human body in motion by Edward Muybridge. So he never hid this fact, and even when he was shown a fake painted in his own style, he saw the humorous side of it and said, "I like the staircase of that, I might even use it." Don Morrison, writing in Time magazine on the Picasso and the Masters exhibition in Paris in 2008, said Pablo Picasso rampaged like a minotaur through modern art's china shop, where he lifted themes, compositions and techniques and colour schemes from other artists with a brazenness bordering on felony. But then again, Picasso always added his own distortions and subversions as he moved into uncharted territory. So, I begin making my series of heads from a press-molded generic head shape, and then I model the portraits onto that. The tactile and malleable qualities of the clay allow me to transcribe the energy of Bacon's bold mark-making and passionate colours, almost in the same way that Braille provides access to the written word. Equally, the works embody my own aesthetic sensibilities and emotional responses to Bacon's work, and thereby function as work in themselves. So I'm coming to the end of my Masters now, but rather than coming to a conclusion, I feel that this is just the beginning of a journey that I would like to take to another level. I've seen how interacting with a work of art can stir a curiosity in the viewer that might not otherwise happen. And I would like to develop a program. Oh, these are some of the heads here. And I have some of the heads just up here too. So afterwards, if you want to come up and feel them and touch them, it's quite all right to do so. So I'd like to develop a program that could possibly be adapted by museums and galleries and help make art more accessible to those who are visually impaired. So I'd also like to continue with the teaching side of my practice, and I particularly enjoy working on community and school projects. For many of the transition year students in Ross Mini School, it was their first experience in an art class and the first time that they could be involved in creating something that was not specifically part of the school's syllabus. This freedom and sense of accomplishment was palpable and certainly stirred a curiosity that I hope that they would carry forward for the remainder of their time in school. This picture here on the right is Brendan, and Brendan lost his sight when he was 2. And I brought in some of the heads into the school so that they could experience them and feel them. And when he saw this one here, he just said, this is mad. He said, what is it? You know, so we started to go through it, and he started to feel it, and he said, oh, but he's only one ear on one side, and there's nothing on the other side. And I said, yeah, this is what Bacon was all about, you know. It was these bold expressions and marks that he had on his paintings. And then they started talking about Bacon and what was he about, and they wanted a lot more information about him. And then they said, you know, well, can we go to they asked their teacher if she would take them to the Hugh Lane Gallery to see the exhibition there. So I do feel that the pieces have they have worked in the way that I want to work, that I hoped that they would work. So I really would like to develop this a lot further. So thank you. So now I would like to introduce you to Georgie Thompson, who is the National Programmer at IMA, and she will talk to you about the Altered Images exhibition, which will be coming to IMA in May. Thank you.
Hi, Eleanor Swan asked me to talk about Altered Images, which is a partnership exhibition I've worked on with South Tipperary County Council, Mayo County Council and the Irish Museum of Modern Art. So it was a partnership exhibition, and the aim of the exhibition was to stimulate engagement with the visual arts for the general public and to place a particular emphasis on accessibility in a multimodal way. The exhibition came about through experience which Damien O'Connor, who's the Disability Arts Coordinator with Mayo County Council, had whilst working in Manchester. He worked on an exhibition which focused on one artwork by David Hockney in Manchester City Art Gallery. And the idea of that exhibition was to make a very accessible exhibition. During his time, he worked as a scriptwriter on this project, and during this time he met people who have ended up helping us quite a bit with the Altered Images project. Damien then returned to Ireland. Actually, just to let you know that this Altered Images project has been running for 3 years, approximately 3 years now, so it gives you an idea of the timescale. So Damien returned to Ireland, and he now works as Disability Arts Coordinator at Mayo County Council. His colleague there is Anne McCarthy, the Arts Officer. So Damien's experience in Manchester led to his proposal that we should try, in Ireland we need an exhibition which might be more accessible, and why not try to make one. So Anne agreed with this proposal, and then other people came on board, such as Sally O'Leary from South Tipperary County Council and Joanne Mullen from the Irish Museum of Modern Art. Just to explain a little bit about the national programme, it's one of IMA's programmes which we try to focus on the museum's collection to programme exhibitions and events outside of the museum in Ireland. I'm here because I covered Joanne Mullen's maternity leave a couple of times, so that's how I've become involved in the project. So in terms of the artwork which is in the exhibition, it was selected by Joanne and Sally. All of the artworks make reference to classical or art historical sources in either the method of depiction or their subject matter. The artworks come from the three partner organisations' collections, and the artists represented are Alice Marr, Daphne White, Thomas Breslin, David Creedon, Caroline McCarthy and Abigail O'Brien. An artwork was commissioned for the exhibition, and that artwork is by Amanda Coogan. So it's a touring exhibition, and its first journey was to South Tipperary County Museum in Clonmel, and that was last summer. And then it travelled to Ballina Art Centre, and I'm sorry, the photos are rubbish, I took them. And just to say, what you're seeing here are exhibition installation shots, and on the walls we have the artworks. Actually, we didn't have any 3D work, so a lot of it is flat. There are a couple of videos. There are 9 artworks in the exhibition in total, and all of them are flat works because the videos are being shown on screens. So the models that we've made models for each artwork. The models are placed on plinths. On the plinths there is a braille label and there's a large format label, text label. There's also an MP3 player. The MP3 player holds audio which is dedicated to that artwork. It only deals with one artwork, and each artwork has their own model and MP3 player. So the exhibition is due to open on the 18th of May at 6 o'clock at IMA, and we're really delighted if anybody can make it at 6 o'clock on the 18th of May. We have a lot of work to do, as you can see from this exhibition, or this photo, but Fintan O'Toole has agreed to open the exhibition, and Amanda Coogan is going to give a performance during the opening as well, so I think it should be a good night. The show runs until the 15th of August, we can't make the opening. So the ways in which we tried to make the exhibition more accessible were through tactile interpretations, audio, large print, braille, our website, and Amanda Coogan's artwork. So in terms of the tactile interpretations of the artworks, which were made by Thompson of Topographic, this is a website that you might be interested in, which is www.topographic.co.uk. Loz is a contact that Damien O'Connor made whilst working in Manchester. Loz visited IMA to see the artworks that were going to be in the exhibition, so he had previous experience of the artworks, and then he used images to start to make the models from. By way of an example, one of the artworks in the exhibition is by Caroline McCarthy. It's The Luncheon. It's a photograph of a still life made from wet toilet paper. The wet toilet paper has been moulded into fruit and vegetables. And this is one of the beginning stages of the model that Loz made. And this is the final product, which has been patented bronze model. This is somebody using the model, so you can definitely get the 3D quality of it. And the model in situ beside the artwork in Clonmel, you can see that it's attached to the plinth, the braille label on the right hand side, and the large format text to the left hand side on the plinth. This photo is missing the MP3 players which would accompany it. But the idea was that somebody could listen to the audio about the artwork whilst touching the model, using the model, or they could just use the audio in front of, if they're looking at the artwork itself, just use the audio with the artwork. So back to audio. Each of the artists agreed to record themselves discussing their artworks, so that audio information is on each of the MP3 players and on the website. Anne Hornsby, who again is another contact that Damien made whilst working in Manchester, made audio descriptions of each of the artworks. She also recorded the catalogue essays, so this information is available on the website. The audio catalogues are on a CD, so people visiting the exhibition can pick up a CD if they'd like one. So each audio description is on the MP3 player with the artist description of their artwork. We used large print for the catalogue, labels and website. I suppose graphic design was a tool which was really useful in this project. There were guidelines we had to follow for it, such as much contrast, larger type. So that's where you'll see a lot of black and white, and yellow and black is another guideline that we were given by people who worked in this way before. Braille, we published a Braille catalogue, and we used Braille for labels also. Amanda Quiggins' artwork for commission is presented in Irish Sign Language with performative interventions. The idea behind her video is to introduce the audience to contemporary art via artworks included in altered images. We relied heavily on our website, www.alteredimages.ie. There's a lot of information here, including audio and various downloads of essays from the catalogue, etc. We wanted people to be able to visit the exhibition without necessarily coming to the exhibition if they couldn't make it, or perhaps to listen to some of the audio before they attended or afterwards. The feedback so far has been extremely positive. Simple things like large print labels were really welcomed. One thing was that we printed labels to 16 points size, laminated them, and then somebody who might have low vision could bring them around an exhibition and could see the labels very easily without having to bend down and look at labels on a wall, which I think can be quite irritating. The plinths, it's not really a feedback point, but one of the guidelines we had was that they ought to be 80 to 110 centimetres high, and that it did mean that children, people in wheelchairs and adults could use them. One problem was though that with the model, you might want to spend quite a bit of time with them. There's a lot of detail, and people bending over and touching the models might find that quite tiring. The MP3 players we used were too small. People with visual impairments didn't find them difficult to use, but other visitors did. So we're going to, according to our budget, we'll try and get something better and bigger for the show coming to Inno. Visits which people made who hadn't been to exhibitions or galleries before, when they're accompanied by a workshop, a tour, or a tour, really worked very well. In summing up, Clonmel and Mayo has been very successful. We hope it will be in Emma. We're dealing with a bigger exhibition space, and it's also more difficult to navigate, so I'm sure we're going to get quite a bit of feedback about that. We'll also have greater footfall. We're holding a discussion day which is going to be held on the 18th of June, and the idea behind that is that people such as Lyle Simpson and Anne Hornsby, and also a guy called Marcus Dickey Horley, who's from the Tate, are going to present guidelines and best practice that they know of. I'm going to try and glean as much information on that day, compile it, and hopefully be in a position to disseminate it to anybody else who wants to try and make an exhibition more accessible. The Arts Council are supporting us with this discussion day. And also I'd just like to say that the artists have really supported us during this exhibition and continue to do so to thank them. And also maybe just to mention again that the opening is on the 18th of May if anybody would like to come. Thanks very much.
I'd like to thank you, Georgie, for that. And now I would like to introduce Karun O'Mara, who is the Bank of Ireland Research Fellow here at NCAD, and he will talk about the multimodal visitor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Cearbhall O'Mara is the name, as you heard. I find it quite an honour to be invited by Eleanor to address you in the context of her work, and I promise you I'll try not to take over the whole afternoon talking about my work. The two themes you've heard so far have been addressing disability in the sense of what I call retrofitting, something that was created for a visual environment and trying to convey that to people who are largely visually impaired. I've been some 25 years campaigning as a designer and architect myself, who went blind 25 years ago. I have been campaigning for the civil rights of people with disabilities over the years and pioneering a lot of the approaches that we've seen developing in Ireland. While I was president of the Institute for Design and Disabilities, the Bank of Ireland kindly released me to attend the college here as a research fellow, with the title of Visiting Research Fellow, to explore setting up a definition of human nature in terms of a variety of modalities, the modalities of human experience, I call it. And since I can recognize that there are many modalities, I call the user or the person multimodal, and hence the title that Eleanor has given me, the multimodal visitor to an exhibition. The problem with the retrofitting approach is that we really have no guidelines, nothing to remind us to think of being inclusive. For instance, if we take the context of this seminar here, the traditional approach of all of us is a visual presentation. I'm using a visual presentation myself. I'm assisted in doing that by Stephen O'Toole here in front of me, who's working with me for 6 months from NUI News, working as my assistant, which is great. And we do have video there, do we, Stephen? Yeah. And if there's anybody here who is, like me, blind, I'd like to know that, but they should also be reassured that I will be talking through the whole subject, and hopefully Stephen can track me with the video. So it's the other way around today for this next few minutes. So I've only got a few minutes, so I'll go straight to the theme of the modalities of the user. The purpose of my study is to define the various modalities of human beings that enable a person, or enable all persons to act in the way that they choose to act. This word modality has caused me a lot of trouble for the past year. I'm quite comfortable that it's the right word, but I'm having difficulty proving that academically, which is my job now in this research. But the word modality comes down to different ways of doing things. It also involves a lot of different senses. Generally, they're referred to as different modes of operation. So I think the word modality is valid, but it is unusual to use it in terms of human being and human behavior. The modalities address you and me, all of us. They're not about disability. And that's something I have to really emphasize, because as a very patently, obviously a candidate for disability myself, although not defined so in Irish legislation, which is another discussion that we're talking about. So I don't qualify as blind under the Disability Act. I don't qualify, although blind, I don't qualify as disabled under the Disability Act. So the modalities of human nature apply to all of us. As Eleanor opened up today and asked you to close your eyes, was there anyone here who didn't close their eyes when she asked? We'll be watching you. The idea of conceiving an idea in that modality, the non-visual one, of hearing a verbal description, is quite an interesting opening, and it's what attracted me to Eleanor's work. And she is actually, without defining it my way, she has entered into the same field. So I'm very happy to collaborate with her on that. I hope that my work will actually give a language and a focus for this discussion. There are 4 concepts that generally are used to address this issue and give guidelines on what to do. We've heard a lot of dimensions being called out and specific projections and sizes of presentation to be used in the exhibitions and in the Altered Images exhibition particularly. These guidelines come at you as an ocean of data which is far, far too complex and you can't take it in. So by being able to say that those are the factors of different modalities, suddenly they become, this is a toolkit that's in that particular box. So if I have to address all the modalities, at least I don't have to think of all the inches. I can think of it in global terms as a non-visual modality, a tactual modality, an audio modality, and so on. So please do not see what I'm talking about as about disability. Modalities are yours and my different modalities. So I'd like to explore that very quickly now. If you take, for example, the visual modality, which Eleanor has so described to us already with the slides, you use your eyes to see something. With the audio modality, you listen. For instance, you would listen to the sound of the rain falling to know whether it's going to be so heavy that you better put on a raincoat or get soaked. You would use smell to smell if it's when it's summertime and if the garden is nice, you'll notice the smell of the flowers in the garden, and that makes a difference. And these are things you can't see. It causes a different environment when you smell it. Similarly, when you feel the heat of the sun is so strong, you can't see the strength of that sun. Quite often if it's cloudy, but you can feel the heat on your arms and you know you're going to get sunburned. So that's another of the senses, another modality, the tactual modality. And then you can feel the wind and feel the dampness on your face through the kinesthetic modality. Again, it's something you can't see, but you can feel the effect of it. So these are the variety of modalities that exist, and we use the modalities to negotiate with the same object. We can use a few modalities. For instance, if somebody greets us, we see somebody coming towards us smiling. We can see by their face, if we can see, that through sight, that they're greeting us and being pleasant. We can also hear that if they say hello. And when we hear somebody greeting us, then we can identify whether it's a man or a woman or a child. You don't have that, no?
You.
Pardon?
Steve.
Oh, yeah. And so, I want to take you through a little exercise which some of you may have seen before, where we'll have a look at the Powerscourt waterfall in Wicklow. One of our most powerful cultural images is Powerscourt, and it's a natural image, unspoiled beauty really, where this river is tumbling over a cliff and is falling dramatically down rocks and leaves into a river below. And I'm sure all of you will have seen it. Is there anybody here who's never seen Powerscourt? If you haven't related to the nearest waterfall, you do know. Now, the point is, are we showing that image now, Stephen? So as you see this image, and you see the water coming down over the cliff, and you can see and you know that that water is splashing on rocks, you can imagine the sound that it's making. You can also imagine how wet it is and how humid it is. As soon as you see that image, is there anybody who could say that they're not thinking of that now at this stage, just looking at that image? I suggest you probably are all thinking that, because it would be perfectly natural to do so. We would automatically fit all these other experiences, which should be coming from other modalities, while we're dealing with the purely visual one. And you can make that mistake of thinking that you've been there and you've experienced it, when all you're doing is looking at a flat image. Only when you come closer to the image do you start to bring in the other modalities. As you come closer to the waterfall, you begin to hear the rushing sound of the water in the distance. And you, coming closer and closer, you can hear the cry of birds flying around in and out. And then, as the sound effect is just beginning to come on now, as we are approaching the waterfall, and as you hear that sound, you guess what is happening. Now, if anybody live near the N11, you could be forgiven for thinking that that's the N11. But now it's very clearly the waterfall. And although in that clip you don't hear any of the birds singing, you can most definitely feel the wetness, can't you? Listening to that sound. Again, you're associating, because we're not actually feeling the wetness. So we're associating with our memory of the experience of the modality, and it's confusing the images that we're getting. The only real one we had there was the audio modality combined with the visual sight of the location. In the waterfall, we have the opportunity to explore various modalities, because along with the video and the audio we've just heard, you have the movement of the wind and breezes set up by the falling water affecting the tactual modality, and the audio is amplified in so many ways. There are dimensions that you don't get visually from the echoes being created as the water falls on the rocks, as you heard in that clip there. There's sort of round, hollow sound around the falling water. The echo of the birds flying in and out, which gives a vertical dimension, a dimension of height that if you don't see it, you wouldn't get. But you do get this dimension of height from the movement of these creatures up and down the fall. And then when you touch the plants and vegetation, you can feel how verdant it is and how vibrant the plants are, how strong they are to your touch. Again, something which you don't get from seeing it, you have to touch it to feel that. And so the whole experience beside the waterfall is a very powerful multimodal experience, where these modalities are all blending together to give you the image which we had at the very beginning of this exercise. When you saw an image far, far away, you knew it was a waterfall. These are the details within it. Our needs in life to allow everybody to function is that we identify each of these modalities and recognize each one for the message it gives, and how useful that message is, and how realistic is that message. The only one we consciously communicate with in our daily lives is the visual one. And I would ask you to pay attention to the noise of the traffic out on Thomas Street outside here. Horrendous some days, absolutely appalling noise. And we put up with that. If you converted that noise into light, we wouldn't stand for it. Now, coming back to our nice, cozy, romantic image at the Powersport waterfall, imagine you're on a nice, hot, summer's day, you're there at the fall, you're enjoying it, you're with your family, you're having a picnic, and it's all nice, and you lay back, and behind you, which as any of you know the site, it's actually, the car park is right on the riverbank. And behind you, if somebody starts up an old engine, and a broken down vehicle, and it explodes into life, and the effect that that would have on the image that you have of the nature in all its beauty and richness in front of you. Suddenly, the audio dimension has been interfered with. We were listening to tinkling water, we were listening to birds flying in and out, and the child, being a child nearby and playing around, and some whinging as they will require things, but being so very pleasant. Suddenly, this awful noise takes off. And not only the noise of the car starting up, but the fumes coming from its exhaust to destroy those lovely smells we're getting with the fresh vegetation and water. This modality has been totally destroyed by the indiscriminate permission to have a vehicle in that condition, which could impose on that modality because it's not the visual modality. The car probably looks very quaint. Then you have somebody else, wealthy, well-off, symbol of his wealth, flying in a helicopter. And this helicopter takes over and interferes with the whole environment as well. It takes it all over, it takes it right away from us. Because we allow a vehicle to be generated that has such an impact on the airwaves as to interfere with us with those sounds. The multimodality is real. People can operate on, I would say, pretty well 5 modalities all of us can use. When you have a disability, it means one of those modalities can't be used, but all the others can. And it's, like I said in the beginning, I'm not recognized as disabled under the Disability Act because I am not prevented from functioning by virtue of my blindness and that have to be prevented from carrying out a business or profession by virtue of that blindness in order to be registered disabled, which is a nonsense, because it puts me in what I call, told them I'm the undisabled. Disability is not an issue, should not be a social issue for us. If society caters for all the modalities, then it's of no concern to any of us if somebody can't hear, can't see, can't walk. There will be alternatives, and we are readily communicating on all those fronts. That's my task. That's what I have to try and create. As we go on, I hope you'll be able to help me with that. Pardon? Yeah. So, Eleanor, over to you. Thank you very much indeed.
So I'd like to thank Carol for that presentation, and now I'd like to open to the floor for anybody who might have any questions. Well, first of all, I'd just like to ask Georgie about the Altered Images exhibition in IMA, and do you feel that there is a need for this, or is it possible that it will be developed further, or do you think that this just might be a one-off thing?
I think that, well, I'm hoping that from the discussion day that we have, that we'll be able to compile enough kind of information for future exhibitions, whether it's at the museum or through the museum's national programme, or also for art centres around the countryside. I think there are we'll have different levels of things we're able to do in the future, and I know I shouldn't bring it up, but budgets about what we can afford, but there are some very simple things we could do to improve the way our exhibitions work, and such as large print labels. It's not a massive thing to do, and we could definitely make improvements, and I hope we will continue to use this information we've discovered recently. Thanks.
I'd like to say that I've been looking at many galleries around in the States, in London, here in Ireland, and I really think that there's something that's really lacking, because I think if you develop something for people who are visually impaired, it also has a huge impact on those who can see. For example, and I'm only picking these pieces here, that anybody who has actually interacted with them, sighted or non-sighted, then they have asked more questions about it. And one project that I would like to do, which I haven't set up in one place at home, is that I'd like to take a series of these into the workplace. And there's one factory in Newbridge who has agreed that I can set this up as an exhibition in their canteen. So that I've picked around Kildare because of the association with Francis Bacon, but this could be applied to any other artist. But I'd like it set up in the canteen for 2 weeks, and with a table where people can comment on it, on the work. I'll have information about Francis Bacon and what he did and where he lived and all of that, so that I hope that it sort of generates some interest in it, and that perhaps then people will go to galleries. You know, because a lot of people are very much intimidated about going in, because they think, oh, that's something way above us and I'll never understand it. But actually art is there for everybody. So I'm hoping that by bringing the art to the workplace, then that will have some kind of an impact, and hopefully that it can take that a bit further and develop it a bit further, and it could go out to different places. But I have one factory that have agreed to do it anyway, so I'm looking forward just to finding out how that will, the results from that.
I think it's brilliant. I think, especially for craft as well, in exhibitions in Ireland, it would be great to have an area where you can touch and feel the pieces and things like that as well, and have much more interpretation, like be it braille or audio or that, all the way through to show with the works. I curated an exhibition in the Hub in Lincolnshire where we had braille text, and we had a touch and feel table, and it was really successful because of that. So we brought in a whole new audience who wouldn't even come into the gallery situation at all, and I think there should be much more of that in all of our exhibitions, as well as in the workplace. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like I had some of those vessels, the vessels with the heads on them. I had those at an exhibition last year, and people came in and they walked around and they were kind of touching them, So anyway, after the introduction, I said I'd like everybody to just go over. They can lift the pieces, they can handle them, and they can, and just to see what would happen. And then they did, and they kind of they lifted them up, and they said what. They wanted to know then what it was all about, but it was this interaction that made that happen. Because they said that when the minute they did see them, that's what they wanted to do, but they were afraid to touch it, But I think sometimes there's this preciousness. I know some things are very precious, but there is this preciousness about them. But in general, people don't want to break something. Then they're generally very, very careful about what they hold on to or what they touch, So I think if you allow that, then they have a greater respect for the piece. So I think there is a place for it. So, and I'd like to see more of it happening in the galleries around, Instead of sometimes you just find a little small pinch pot or a thrown pot in the ceramics area anyway, a thrown pot or a pinch pot or a coil pot, and that's it. I mean, there's just so much more out there that you could have.
In the first presentation, or I should say in the EMA presentation, there were some issues that came up about the size of the room that the exhibition was put in. And there's also this question about the spaces that could be retrofitted to have an exhibition for the visually impaired. And my question is, does the physical architecture of where you have these places have an impact on the independence of a visually impaired audience member to walk through, to even find the Braille inscriptions in the space? Does there need to be, is there a way we can think about architecture before the construction of even these spaces that would enhance the ability or independent mobility of the visually impaired in a museum space itself?
Well, I suppose, but I'll give it to Georgie there, because you had to address all those issues for say, the IMA. You said it was going to be more difficult in IMA.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult in IMA because the space is essentially a corridor with rooms off it, whereas in the other exhibition areas they were kind of like one big rectangle, and either when you went into the exhibition, the tendency was for somebody to go clockwise or anti-clockwise and follow it that way. I think we will have problems, so we're trying to resolve those at the moment. And also because the building is built in 1680, that their conservation. I don't know how much we can change the building. We can put up false walls. And there are fire and safety regulations that need to be addressed, but they're all things, I don't know, I actually think Carol can probably answer this question a lot better than I could, because he has so much experience in this and dealing with an older building. I don't know how much we can change and how much will change, but Carol might be able to give some, I don't know, what do you think, Carol?
You have that, Carol.
I appreciate the question actually, but it comes back to this question of modalities. If there is a sense that because it's for the blind, it's a mystery, and the mystery is something only the blind would know. In a way, I'm glad that Eleanor didn't throw it to me first of all, because that would have been the obvious thing to do. The experience that Georgie's had is more valuable, because it's how people interact with an exhibition is the question. The technique of working non-visually is simply linear. Give a line and you can follow the line. For example, the bicycles that are on the pavements outside for getting a green bicycle, those are set so the tails, the wheels, the curved surface of the wheel is projecting into the footpath. And if somebody is trailing along the footpath with a stick, that stick needs a straight edge to follow, and it gets tangled in the wheels of the bicycle first before it sorts out whether it's a bicycle or not. So by lacking thinking of what it is that guides the person into these complications, and everything's, oh God, it's very difficult. If you won't look at the parameters involved, you won't get it right. So if you close your own eyes and see how would you manage the space, Get the whole of the basic techniques, like how the long cane works. The back of the hand can trail a countertop, so a sort of a pathway or a line of cables that zigzag around the room are perfectly good for getting to different spots. It's going to be a tactile contact, so therefore anything that has to be touched has to be secure or unbreakable. There's nothing more embarrassing than touching something and finding a break as soon as you touched it, because people didn't think it was going to suffer such an impact. It says you have the answers yourselves. If you just put yourself into the non-visual mode, you'll see the answer. That's how to come up with it, really. I use the Braille speak here for taking notes, and Braille is fantastically fast for taking down transcribing text, much more than the full keyboard is on a computer. And if everyone learned Braille, then there'd be no issue about Braille. We'd all be communicating with Braille. We wouldn't have to use text on our mobile phones, because we'd only need 6 keys. Well, we wouldn't have to do that funny multiple key texting you do on a mobile phone. We could do it all with just the 6 keys. But we won't do it because it's for the blind, God help them. We don't want to be going near them. And visually, everything, when I was partially sighted and going blind, all the materials presented to me as a blind person were grey, battleship grey. It was appalling visually. And the image then of the blind is curtailed because the products being applied are medically based and not aesthetically or artistically based. And so, again, that's because we don't recognize it as the same that we could all do it. When you try out Eleanor's sculpture here, close your eyes and experience it as a non-visual experience, and challenge it as a non-visual experience as to what it's telling you, so that she can get guidelines as to what symbols to use for the different surfaces she's got on it. Can I go into that for a minute?
I don't think so now, because it's 3 o'clock. On to the next presentation will be coming up now. But I'd like to thank you all anyway for your attention here today. Thank you.